So show of hands, how many of you have ever seen or experienced this? And for those of you who can't tell, it's a garbage truck that's stuck under an overpass. Okay, a couple of you. My point with this is that somebody has to plan for scenarios like this, ideally for scenarios like this to never happen. And when we're talking about planning for trash in general, somebody looks at things like truck dimensions, turning radius, how big the bins are, how big the enclosure is that's supposed to house the bins. And with growing regulations around solid waste, particularly around commercial organics, cities are strapped for meeting diverse needs while meeting compliance. And so the goal of my research was to bridge the gap that exists between solid waste management and urban planning. So today I'm here to share a story about how planning can be our partner. And in the next 8 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a quick background on the study, an overview of the successful tools that was found from it. I'm going to go over each of the tools one by one, as well as some additional considerations when implementing those tools and a recap of everything that we would have learned. So in the summer of 2015, I looked at 9 Bay Area cities, and I specifically asked them questions about how do you address solid waste requirements through urban planning, specifically around commercial development projects. Each of those 9 cities were selected based on 3 criteria. Either they had a population size of 100 to 200,000, they all practiced some type of integrated waste management, and they were all covered under the same stormwater permit, more commonly known as the MRP. Now, survey says that these are the 5 most effective tools for integrating solid waste management into the permit approval process for commercial development projects. The first one, inclusion in the process. Second is accessible information. Third is technical programs, followed by staff training, and then leadership. And I'll go into each of these one by one. Starting with inclusion in the process. Simple enough, you want to include us in the process, in the decision-making table. So things like when the development projects are in and routed for review across the different departments, make sure it gets routed to the division or the person that's going to look at it for solid waste concerns. Also, invite us to your meetings, and that's meetings both held within city staff as well as meetings that are happening with the applicants. Look at your standard checklists, and again, those are checklists that are happening with just internal staff, as well as checklists that are given to the applicant for things like submittal requirements. And then also look at your municipal code. Does your zoning code have anything in there that specifically says that the applicant or the planner has to look at things like solid waste? One planner from the city of Hayward mentioned, it's much easier if you can point to the code and say, you have to do this, instead of please do this. Accessible information. Is the language that you're using clear, concise, and enforceable? Look at how you're distributing that information. Are you distributing it multiple times in the permit approval process? And how is it being distributed? Is it accessible across different languages and both online and not? And several cities actually talked about the use of a standalone document, a completely separate document that houses all of your solid waste requirements in it. And for those cities, they mentioned, particularly Santa Clara, that it's something that you could give to developers, to planners. It is a one-stop shop for everything regarding solid waste. Third is technical programs. I think all of your cities have some sort of technical program for permit tracking, but are there ways in that permit program that you can flag a project that is subject to additional solid waste requirements? You can also use it as a way to coordinate multiple programs. For the city of Palo Alto, for example, they were able to bridge their Acela permitting program with the Green Halo program. And from their experience, they found an efficiency gain of 1/2 to 1 full-time staff person, which is pretty hard to beat. Fourth is staff training. Aside from making sure that everybody on your team is trained on all of the technical programs that you're using, consider cross-discipline knowledge. And that could be achieved by setting up a half-hour meeting with another department, letting them know what are the concerns that we are looking for. Setting up a brown bag lunch or setting up a ride-along or a sit-in so that all the different departments can understand equally what we are doing to try to achieve compliance. And as one planner from the city of Santa Clara mentioned, we need to achieve that extra level of collaboration so that we can speak consistently and coherently to the developer and what we need. And finally, it's leadership. And leadership can really come from management or not, but basically speak early, speak consistently about what you need. If you can, identify a leader or a partner in another department who can help you reach your goals. And to the extent that you can, try to build those relationships in a way that's mutually beneficial. As one person stated from the city of Hayward, anytime you can prove that a relationship is mutually beneficial, after time it tends to warm up. So, before implementing any of this, a number of considerations came up in the study. We're all strapped for limited time and resources, so that's always something to really consider. Second, if you're a single source versus a division of labor type of city, that means if you're a city that has all of your solid waste review done by one person or one division, versus if you're a city that has that split across multiple divisions, those are things to consider. There's pros and cons to both in terms of saving time and resources. But if you're going to do the latter, make sure all of those definitions of who does what are clearly defined, just to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. New programs always require that initial investment of time and resources, but there could be long-term benefits. For those cities that mentioned using a standalone document, that required an initial investment of time and resources, but they found that down the road, it required way less hand-holding from internal staff as well as from applicants. Hauler contracts. If you're a city that hasn't yet considered it, it might be something worth considering. For those cities that have a hauler contract, they mentioned that being able to convey design requirements tied to a specific hauler was much easier than having to convey those same design requirements across multiple needs. And then 5, public response. We're always going to be concerned about how the public is going to respond with the services that they're getting and the transparency of the information that they're getting. So to recap, we learned the 5 most effective tools for integrating solid waste management into the permit approval process for commercial developments, as well as considerations before implementing any of those. And as we continue to work towards our zero waste goals, in the meantime, we still have to address trash today, as it impacts our compliance with stormwater regulations, growing compost requirements, as well as addressing the needs of our service providers, our business owners, and the public, and in all the ways that the public is going to respond. So my last message to you is, instead of seeing planning as a hurdle, we can take that proactive step and see planning as a partner. I'd like to take a moment to thank these people and cities for their sharing their time and their experiences with me. And if you'd like to see the full report, it is at this website. Thank you.
We have time for questions? It's always a tough one, right over here. Sorry. Recap the question if you can.
So the question was about, did the cities also look at tenant improvements or renovations as opposed to just new development? For the purpose of this study, we focused specifically on new developments, but that is definitely a top concern that came across all the interviewees.
All right, it must be lunchtime.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go, one more.
What's the coolest enclosure you've ever seen?
The coolest enclosure?
I have to say, as long as it has a roof, 4 walls, and a lockable door, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's it. Very good. Thank you